One of the things that I notice when I look around the internet is that there's a lot of snake oil, there's a lot of people, shilling courses, and of course there's some good things, there's maybe some things we could argue about, but either way, packaging our knowledge into a course or YouTube channel and sharing it with people is definitely really valuable. I'm always curious what people would love to teach. It might be something that you haven't packaged yet, but if you were to say you wanted to just go create a course that everyone should take, what would you build that around?
Yeah, it's a really cool question. My brain goes to a million different places because I'm just interested in a lot of stuff, right? Like, I love to read. I've been a reader ever since I was a little kid. Basically, my parents always made me read. So like, I'd love to do a history course. There's been plenty of times where I thought, like, why don't I just create a YouTube channel where I just tell history stories with me just being myself and like cursing and being humorous, with because history is usually so boring and academic, right? But I love it. Part of me would love to teach a skateboarding course just because skateboarding was such a big part of my life. I mean, still is, but I'm just too old now. Like I'm 38, I can't hit the pavement like I used to, you know? Um, but the one that really, really comes to mind is Muay Thai. Um, uh, Muay Thai is it's a martial art. It's a stand-up martial art. It's like striking. And a lot of times when I say Muay Thai, people think like Tai Chi, which is more of a Chinese, like real peaceful, kind of flowy movement type martial art. Muay Thai is not like that. It's super violent. It's really about like kicking people and elbowing people in the head and in the liver and in the ribs. And it is just the most beautiful, most like peaceful, amazing thing that you can do with your time. Um, the reason why Muay Thai changed my life so much was because I've been a runner and like an endurance athlete my whole life. But I think just from all the years of running, and I was pretty abusive to my body through sports. Like I played full contact lacrosse and did a lot of martial arts and wrestling and stuff. But eventually I had a really bad back injury and I needed back surgery. It was terrible. It was like debilitating. But I had the surgery and it kind of saved my life, honestly, because I woke up and the pain down my legs was all gone. And it was like one of the most emotional moments of my life. I thought like I wasn't going to be able to really walk anymore. Um, but I couldn't run. And it was really, really hard for me considering how much of like a mental release I used to get from just going on 10:30 p.m. runs with no shirt on and listening to music and nobody talking to me. I couldn't do it anymore. And after trying to figure out what I was going to do, I just walked into a kickboxing class. And from that moment on, I've just been super hooked. It's extremely fun. It's like it is really beautiful, like it's very violent, but the connection that you get with your body, especially as Americans, because as Americans, like we sit and we walk and we just go forward and like people in the Eastern world have a much different perception of how their body's supposed to move. I've learned so much about my body. Um, I've learned so much about just fighting in general. Like I said, I was a wrestler, so I always kind of understood it, but it's different when like you're punching and kicking people. And and the bond that you build with people after doing like 20-minute sparring sessions with them and just the pain that is in the same way really great. Like it feels good. The suffering that you do with other people feels good in a way. I love it. I would love to teach people Muay Thai.
It's beautiful because there's so many transferable skills, and there's a lot that you mentioned there that I'd love to ask follow up questions about. One of the things, before we go too far from the actual topic, though, of Muay Thai, I think you kind of snuck it in there at the end. I was about to ask, is Muay Thai similar to uh, what you would consider kickboxing?
Yeah, absolutely. Muay Thai is from Thailand. It literally means the art of eight limbs. So when Americans think of kickboxing, we just think of punches and kicks, but Muay Thai has elbows, knees, um, even other things like leg kicks. Like traditional kickboxers, like Dutch kickboxers, they kind of thought leg kicks were like cheap and cheating, But if you go to Thailand, you'll come up against some 120-pound, super gangly, super skinny kid that'll just kick you 2 or 3 times in the leg. and you'll just be completely debilitized. So it is kickboxing, but it's like as elite a form of kickboxing as there is.
When I think of learning a new craft like that, you mentioned waking up in the hospital and having one of the most emotional moments of your life. That brought me back as a side note just to last week. My dad actually had a liver transplant, saved his life, and he's still very much recovering. But, it really spoke to me in that idea of a life changing opportunity, kind of like a rebirth or what have you. When you went to find your next sport, sort of, uh, on these journeys, a lot of times we have a guide and we have something that like led us to finding that. Like, were you just looking up like things I could do now that I can't run? Like, how did you stumble upon Muay Thai?
Yeah, I lived in Nashville at the time, and yeah, I just stumbled upon it. It was actually like a kickboxing gym, and two things happened. I've been an athlete my entire life, and I'm going to sound kind of pretentious when I say this. Like, I'm usually pretty good at stuff. Like if there's something I want to learn, I can usually just feel confident and be like, I can figure this out. I was so bad at it. And it was shocking to me just because I was a like high level soccer player as well. So I thought I can kick things, but the way you move your body is so much more rotational as opposed to just like driving straight through a soccer ball with your leg. I couldn't believe how bad at it I was. In addition, the girl who was teaching the class, she was like a high level ballerina. And so she was already very used to having that leg dexterity and just that control of like her feet and her legs and not flailing, like having real precision with her movement. And I remember her demonstrating some of these things and just thinking like that looks so freaking cool. So it's kind of a two-part answer. One was the guide in myself because I was just shocked at how bad I was at it. And I just thought like I need to get better at this. I cannot believe how bad I was. But her name was Sarah actually, and she still lives in Nashville. Her and I talk on Instagram because she's a like an actual fighter. She competes. And so I always keep up with her and yeah, like we continue to talk. She was really the person that I looked at for the first time and thought like, damn, that is so cool. And whatever you're doing, like I want some of it and teach me how to do it. So that's how it started.
I'm really interested in this because one of the things that I like to do at the regular gym I'm at for a warm up, sometimes for cardio, is boxing. And I always find that with boxing, like it's similar to a sport, which when I switched to from football into what at the time, speaking of being pretentious, we used to call becoming civilians. And we were like, what are we going to do now? We're not spending 40 hours a week on a football field. One of the things that I've enjoyed finding, but it's just me and heavy bag and no one else, is boxing, like just combinations and doing 25-minute, rounds, a minute on, 30 seconds off with different combos and that kind of stuff. And I've always wondered what it would be like to go look into some mixed martial arts. Usually I hear of jujitsu, which from what I understand is more about grappling and like the wrestling of it all. Uh, have you tried other martial arts yourself, or is it like Muay Thai that you stuck with?
Oh yeah, I can grapple. Um, again, because of my back, when you're doing jujitsu, people are yanking on your spine a little bit, and so I'm just nervous to do it. There's part in clinch work with Muay Thai where people yank on your spine, but it's kind of hard if you're listening to visualize. Like if you're lying on your back and someone has their hands behind your head, your back is like arched, you're kind of in like a super crunch position. And so that's the particular movement that's like painful for me. But in Muay Thai, like you're standing up and you're facing each other. And so if somebody has their hands behind your back, you don't have to like arch your back to fight it. You kind of lean your hips in and like stand up straight. So the leverage on my spine, it doesn't bother me that much. But yeah, like to answer your question directly, I like boxing. I'm really tall and I just have a really good jab, and so I do enjoy boxing. But they really are different sports because I mean, I know this isn't like a martial arts podcast, but I just find this shit so fascinating. If you look at Americans and you look at boxers, they're taught to stand almost sideways and have like a really low base. Because the reason is if you're sideways from each other, there's less surface area for somebody to punch, And so like they literally make themselves small. But in Muay Thai, you do the opposite. You stand almost, you do have like a staggered stance, but you square up with somebody because if you're totally sideways like that, your lead leg is just hanging out there. And so, like, if a boxer and a Thai fighter ever square up, the Thai fighter's not even really going to do anything. He's just going to kick his calf and kick his leg until eventually the fight's over. And so, it really once you get like a cooler understanding of it all, you can see how these really, really subtle differences make such a big difference in how like you would approach a legit combat situation. And so, I mean, wrestling, I think, is still, if there's one thing to be good at, it's wrestling because no matter how cool somebody looks, if you can just tackle them, they can't do anything, you know? So like American wrestlers, Russian wrestlers are still the most badass dudes on and women on the planet. But yeah, I don't know, man. There's just something about the striking that I really love.
Yeah, when I think to connections with the mainstream MMA world, though, I do think you're starting to see a lot of, more of the kickboxing style people, and even people who aren't traditionally kickboxers, but using that to their skill set. Exactly what you're saying reminds me of McGregor Poirier the second and third time, where he was just kicking that lead leg, or Israel Adesanya, who managed to take over the game for a year with leg kicks too.
Yeah, it's super effective. And it's one of those things where, you know, you could look at it and be like, "Oh yeah, that probably hurts," but like that's not that big a deal. I'm telling you, like if you know somebody that really knows what they're doing, one leg kick will just you'll just quit. You'll just stop. It's awesome. Yeah.
Well, like you said, it's not an MMA podcast, but I love the fact that we can kind of hop around to our different interests and stuff. And I have at least one more question about the topic. You mentioned Sarah being one of those first guides, coaches, people you learned from. I am genuinely curious in this too. So I'm like, it's been on my to do list to go look into some MMA as I shared. Do you think that uh, there is like such thing as bad coaches or good coaches when it comes to that area? Like, what should I be looking for when I go to try and learn because I'm not in Nashville?
It's absolutely good coaches and bad coaches. You know, there's a saying in almost all Muay Thai, but especially striking, is that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. The hardest thing is learning something the wrong way because your body just gets so conditioned to do it. And so when you first start, you know, like you're jacked up and you want to like really wail on the bag and you want to throw some punches and like hit some shit really hard. And it's the one of the best things that like they did for me was to say like, throw this punch as slow and as perfectly as you can, and then do it 200 times. Because then when it's smooth, right? And people try to be fast, but you want to be smooth. And then when you get smooth, like you are fast because there's no wasted movement. You know, like there's no fat in your movements. It's all just super optimized. And so that, I mean, look, I aspire to be a coach at my gym one day. It's kind of one of these like things that I would love to do because you see the kids in there and like how much fun they're having. And so like I would love to be a coach. I'm not one. But if there is a thing that you see is the most common mistake that a good coach would veer you away from, is that new people just get in there and they're just hype, you know, they just want to get after it. And if you can refrain from doing that and just really, really focus on getting the technique down, 6 months from there, you'll be so much further ahead than people that have just been doing it wrong for a year and a half, 2 years, or sometimes their whole lives.
A lot of times I make connections in my writing or content creation between golf and life. And I feel like potentially in the future, I can make a lot of connections between MMA and life as well, because that's a very similar sentiment when it comes
Oh
to
yeah.
the mindset stuff of something like golf, right? That idea that slower is smooth and not having sort of jerkiness in your swing and a whole bunch of mindset stuff. Like,
Hmm.
there's a lot of things that goes into it, but I can definitely see the connections there. I have more of like a yes or no question. I think it's a yes or no question. But as someone with a lot of concussion history, do you think that this is something that's kind of like made me procrastinate a little bit, just wondering what it would be like sparring? Like, because obviously I'm never going to compete. I don't want my kids seeing me knocked out. I had enough of that 20 years ago. So, as just a sport, do you think that it's still something that you can do in the sparring world without it rattling your cage too much?
Yeah, but sparring is different than competing. In a good gym, like you're not allowed to spar until you're controlled. And it's a real no-no to hit somebody to where their head gets knocked back like that. I mean, sometimes it does happen, but usually even when that happens, it's because it was just timed where somebody was like lunging in on you and you just kind of accidentally caught them. But even still, when that happens, the other big no-no is like you don't really clench your fists when you're sparring, yeah, because you got these big fat gloves on, so you're kind of throwing with your hands open like that, and you're just touching people. So I mean, it would have to be like a real freak accident and like real negligence to take a shot that would actually, because concussions are basically your brain rattling back and forth, and so like that it would be very difficult for that to happen. With that being said, I mean, look, this is a whole nother rabbit hole. I would hate for my son to play football. Um, Definitely don't want him throwing kicks and punches at each other. Like it is not good for you. And like we're learning more and more how not good for you it is in like the most recent decade. So I love sparring, but and look, I invite anybody to go fight if they feel the calling for it, but you'll just never see me do that because I like my brain and I don't, it's just not good. And if you fight long enough, you're gonna get knocked out. It doesn't matter how good you are. Like it'll happen.
Yeah, and I'm not super super scared of it. Like I still play ice hockey and still, it's non-contact kind of, but you're still skating around, taking a little bit of risk. And so obviously I'm open to a little bit of risk in, do a little bit of snowboarding and skiing, stuff like that. But I was always curious about what it would be like to spar with concussion history. So I appreciate that. Um, a lot of what I look up to in terms of your work, there's many things, but I think one of the biggest overarching topics is entrepreneurship and business. No doubt there. Uh, if we were to kind of pivot into talking about those topics, I'm curious why you personally either chose or fell into building business as opposed to like a traditional 9 to 5 or getting a job.
Well, there's a reason. I don't know if I've ever told this story before. I probably have. Um, I'm a blue collar kid. Like I grew up in Philly. My mom was a ER nurse in North Philly. My dad threw suitcases under the bellies of planes. He was one of those people you see in the runway when you hear that clunking under your plane. That's your suitcases being logged in. My dad worked for US Air. US Airs was an airline that merged into I think United after 9/11 because they went bankrupt. My dad worked there for 20 years. My mom worked in the ER for like 15 years, and um uh, we weren't poor at all. Like my parents worked really, really hard to keep me and my sister fed basically, but we also didn't have any money. And there's this guy named Professor Galloway whose podcast I like a lot, and he was saying something just about the anxiety of being a little kid. And like I remember my parents bought me my first skateboard, and I always loved Birdhouse because Tony Hawk was like my idol, and they bought me a Tony Hawk Birdhouse skateboard, and I was just blown away. I couldn't believe they actually spent the money on it, and the feeling of even not wanting to ride it, and like not wanting to board slide on it, and not wanting to get the trucks on a curb, just because like my parents bought me this thing, like I can't ruin it. Just like that anxiety, it's a real thing when you're a little kid. I don't think I appreciated it enough until I got a little bit older. Um, so why am I telling you that? After 9/11, my whole life kind of went to shit. Like my dad lost his job. Coincidentally, my mother was the hospital that she worked at. It was called MCP. It was in North Philly. I think they turned into like a apartment complex or something like that. And yeah, like life was hard as a kid, but you didn't know it was hard, right? Like I felt a ton of love in my family. It was never something where I felt like abandoned or nothing. It's just I never seen my parents because they just worked all the time and they worked for me and my sister. And then all of a sudden it was just like, whoa, what are we gonna do? And so that led to like some really difficult years in my family. And I had my driver's license at the time. I just got it. So my license was suspended actually before I had it. So I was like 16 and a half, I guess. And I parked my car in Philadelphia. There's a park basically that covers like a third of the city. It's called Fairmount Park, and I used to go there all the time. Like everybody in Philly goes to Fairmount Park, and I parked at Fairmount Park, and I was going for a walk, and my dad called me on one of those big like Nokia Snake phones, those like indestructible weapon phones, and he said like, "Hey Tim, I just need to let you know, like I was let go from my job. I don't know what we're gonna do. We're gonna figure it out, but I just wanted to let you know." And it really was at that exact fucking moment when I thought, my dad worked there for 20 years. He built himself up. He was a union guy. He he created this position for himself basically on like union safety. I know I'm getting into the weeds here, but at that particular position, you know, those carts that you see that lug the suitcases around, when those carts like come together, almost kind of like train um carriages, right? People would get their hands jammed in a lot. It was a big problem. So my dad built like this whole system in order to save some of the guys that he worked with hand injuries, because they're throwing suitcases, like they injure their hands and then all of a sudden they can't work. It was a big deal. My dad was really involved in it. He did so much stuff, and then just like that, you know, it was all gone. And it was literally at that exact moment that I said, like, that is never ever happening to me. And you know, I can't say I never had a job. I built houses when I was a kid, and I just did a ton of contracting. But, you know, up until, I don't know, I was 19, I guess, I started my first lawn mowing business, and I've just like, I've never had a job since. Like, I loved contracting, and honestly, that was like a really great time in my life. Wake up early, swing a hammer, hang out with the guys, drink coffee, you know, it was amazing. But even still, while I was doing it, I knew like I'm either gonna build my own contracting business or something. This isn't for me. And that's how it happened.
This isn't world's biggest podcast by any means, but at least a few hundred people will listen. And one of the through lines for sure is people being inspired and or jealous because they're like, "Oh, I want to do that. I want to never have a job. I want to build something." And it can be hard with the curse of knowledge, I find, when I'm interviewing people, to kind of like break it down or sort of give a blueprint when there is no blueprint. Uh, but if we were to try, and let's say someone was, sitting beside you, you're waiting for an airplane and it's running late, and they're like, I know who you are. I just looked you up on Twitter and I want to do what you're doing. That's kind of their prompt. They want to ask you how to become an entrepreneur themselves. Massive topic. But what's your version of giving some tips for them?
I would have two things to say. The first thing I would say is to not fall into this trap of entrepreneurship. Like, the internet loves to glamorize it, and it's pretty stupid. There's nothing wrong with having a job. If you have a job, you probably have a little bit of money every month, and you can just as easily create an amazing life for yourself by, I mean, shit, even if you just invest that money into the S&P 500 for 20 years, like, you're going to be a millionaire. You're going to be rich. And and that's great. Or maybe you hate your job, you know, and like that's why you want to do it. The point I'm trying to make is, don't ever do this because Gary Vaynerchuk is yelling at you, telling you to be an entrepreneur. Like, it's all just kind of a trap. It's all people convincing you to be an entrepreneur to buy their own shit about entrepreneurship, right? And that's not actually what it is. If you want to build a business, it is super anxiety provoking, like awful. There's times where you just have straight up panic attacks, especially when you get people on payroll, because sometimes things are going so good. And sometimes, like, damn, do I have to lay somebody off for the first time in my life? Right? It is not a comfortable thing at all. So the first thing I would say is just know what you want. Because if you want to be an entrepreneur because you want to make more money, well, there's plenty of ways to make more money. And you don't have to quote unquote quit your job and go all in. Like, I just think that's so stupid. It's a terrible way to go broke and then get a job that you like even less, statistically. Okay, so now that I'm off my soapbox, what would I tell that person? I would say write. I would say learn to write. Like, everything that I have in my life, including the relationship with my wife, and like that's a true story. Everything I have in my life is just because I was brave enough to write my ideas and publish them. I mentioned Seth Godin. He always said it doesn't count unless you hit publish. Like writing is not enough. It's not about your thoughts. It's about putting your thoughts out there. Every company I've ever built, every like email I've ever sent, every idea I've ever had. I mean, I don't know how many people watch the video. Like I got a notebook with me right now. I never go anywhere without my notebook. I'm writing all of the time. And the reason is because if you can write, you can think, because good writers are good thinkers. So learn to write, publish your writing, and do it until it works. Expect the fact that nobody cares what you have to say for at least a year, and just do it anyway. Every good thing I have in my life is because of my like daily obsessive writing habit. I don't know how to do anything else actually other than like write. And I mean, geez, even sales. I'm a really, really good salesperson. And it's not because I'm good with my words. I had a speech impediment when I was a kid. I was terrified to talk to people for most of my life. But I just wrote enough to the point where I could structure, not necessarily arguments, like sometimes arguments, but I could structure like the chain of events that needs to happen in my mind in order to close a deal, in order to persuade somebody into doing things, in order to get investment money. Like it all comes because I can first organize my thoughts on the blank page. It's the best thing I've ever done.
I feel like that kid sitting there, it'd be awesome to observe this situation because they'd probably be surprised. I've given similar advice to, let's say, teens in the past
Totally.
who are asking similar questions. And even, one or two times explaining to them, they still don't really grasp it sometimes. Like, what do you mean, right? That's a whole other topic because I've had to show people, like, okay, you're writing this for your first year university course. I understand you're not dropping out. So, in support of that, just keep writing like that. But over here, I'm going to show you how Medium works and how writing a thread works and how a blog post that someone will actually read works. And here's an example of a book that hardly ever has, big paragraphs or anything. And that's why you find it more entertaining. And it's hard for them to kind of split their mind between the two. But I've had that experience of helping them learn to be a little bit better at writing over the course of like a couple of years, let's say. And it's pretty beautiful to watch. But again, I don't think people would think of that advice when they think of business. Earlier this week, I interviewed Gina Bianchini, who started Money Networks. And we were talking about what types of things would I do if I were to start a community. And there's a whole other side about why I'm not right now or yet. But I said, I've thought about this a lot in the last few months. And I was like, I'm kind of torn between storytelling and writing. And maybe in a way they're one and the same. But the reason is I feel like they underlie content or business that anyone would want to start. So, YouTube channel, podcast, write a book, create a blog. They can sort of be the foundation to all of those. So, I definitely appreciate where you're coming from. And we can probably sit there for a minute because I know you probably even have more experience than I do when it comes to writing. If we went down the, let's say we're building that module out and it's like your advice on writing, what are some things that people could learn from you?
Jeez. Well, writing's one of those things where like you never think you're good, right? So even people thinking that they can learn from me is a funny thing to think about. Um, I'd say a couple things. I'd say from a technical standpoint, you got to understand that when people read online, rarely, although they do they read the whole thing? So the visual formatting of the post is very important. And that's why Copyblogger was so influential to me when I was learning how to do all this stuff, because I could always tell a story. I could write poems. I've been a writer since I was a little kid, basically. But with Copyblogger, I learned the skill of pattern interrupt in a piece of content to make it so that, you know, when you start glazing over, something else will just interrupt the pattern and you read that. And then, okay, you get through the bullet points. Now there's a new header. Oh, okay, there's like 150 words and then a block quote, right? I'm just coming up with stuff. It really matters. The formatting really, really matters. In terms of the writing itself, good writing trumps all. I mean, there's a guy named Noah something. He has a Substack called No Opinion that I just love. He's such a brilliant writer, and he doesn't do any of that. Like he just writes long paragraphs, and when you read it, you read the whole thing. I read some of them are, I don't know, 4,000 words long, and I read the whole thing. Excuse me. And it's hard to teach people how to tell a story, but I would say as simple as you can get it is that stories have beginnings, middles, and endings. And like everything that I ever write always has that. I'm switching back a little to technical now. If you look at the beginnings of my newsletters, especially, I tell people exactly what the post is about within the first whatever. I'll say like, "Hey, this happened to me. I learned this lesson in this post. I'm going to teach you how to whatever, whatever. In this post, I'm going to teach you what I learned by whatever, whatever. Let's get started." I mean, it's almost how I start every single post, and I know that it hooks people. And every post should have an ending. Now, this is cool because my buddy Cole, he told me a new way of doing it where I always felt like responsible for having a conclusion, and he would say like it's okay to push them off the ledge sometimes, but that doesn't mean that you don't have an ending. Like sometimes the ending means that's all I have to say. But the point is like you need to learn how to wrap it up because it's very, very common for people to feel like they have so much stuff in their minds that they want to say. And so they say it all. Don't do that. And then the third thing is like delete a lot more than you write. I spend more time deleting sentences than I do writing sentences. Like brevity is powerful and it's way better to be clear than it is to be clever. And so, uh, um, it takes practice, really. Like there's no writing is one of those beautiful things where there's just no way to get good at it other than getting good at it. It's kind of like when you see someone that's in shape and you just instantly respect them because there's no way to get in shape without getting in shape. It just doesn't come with hacks. The same thing is with good writing. When you read someone, it's like, wow, this person, they really get it. So you're not, I can say whatever I want on a podcast. It's not going to click for you. But if there's some tips that you can keep in mind, absolutely understand formatting. It's going to save you. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to keep people's attention. Absolutely understand like beginning, middle, and end totally because your piece has to be about something, right? Like every article is about something. And then just keep practicing.
I know that the world of like writing education and learning about writing, well, first of all, like as I mentioned, is so different than high school writing and or English class, language class, if you will, right?
Oh yeah.
But there is so much advice out there. There's so many great books. There's so many great websites, your own included, that it's like hard to remember where you learned something from. But I've definitely often heard the quote that you can't write well, you can only edit well. And
Sure.
it's one of those things you hear different numbers thrown around too. Like a great book was, cut out 70% of the stuff or 40% of the stuff. I think that the numbers are kind of irrelevant, but the point is really important because that's another thing that I have firsthand experience of sharing with someone and also recommending that they don't edit and write at the same time. And those are both kind of light bulbs for them. And when they experience that for themselves, they were like, oh, because they were always stressing about how they were writing or what it looked like in the first place. And that was taking them so long. Once they just realized, oh, wait, this isn't what I'm publishing, they were able to just go and then edit later. And I think that was a really big unlock for people. When I think, again, to that kid who you tell, start writing and write for a year and get better at it, they're probably still wondering, okay, how does that turn into money? Or how do I at some point pick a niche or some sort of audience? And maybe that's a good topic with your experience with building multiple companies and stuff and kind of probably failing and then learning to talk about is that idea of when this person, because we now created an avatar sitting in the airport talking to you, when that person goes to start writing, Should they just write about everything that interests them, or should they be starting to pick something that helps them drill down to being more specific?
It's a great question. And it's actually a question that I get asked a lot now that there's this idea of a personal brand. Because what is a personal brand, right? You know me, I'm Tim Stoddart. I've already talked about my love for Muay Thai, my love for skateboarding. Like, I'm from Philly, so clearly I'm obsessed with the Eagles and the Phillies. And like, it's just hard to distill that into a package because people are so complicated and nuanced. With that being said, I think there's total value in people having like personal freedom to create whatever it is that they want to create. And so that's one side of it. The other side is, should I just pick a topic, pick a niche and stick with it? And here's what I did. I started writing about whatever came to mind. And I'm glad that it happened that way because that's actually how I learned about SEO. What geez, I mentioned Seth Godin a bunch already. The whole inspiration I got when I moved to Florida, I was in like a really weird spot in my life, and somebody gave me a Success magazine, and they bought me a subscription, and they used to have those little DVDs in it, like they were CDs actually, which cracks me up now. But that was only like 12 years ago. Well, it was 15 years ago. And it was an interview with this guy named Seth Godin, who I never heard of before. And at the end of the interview, he gave the advice like, what would you say to somebody that's just starting out? Right? He said, start a blog, don't tell anybody about it, and write in it every day. And so that's what I did. And then all of a sudden, people were leaving comments on my blog. It was a blog spot back. It was like an OG Google software. It's called Blogspot. And I'm thinking, I didn't tell anybody about this. Like, how is anybody even finding it? And so that's how I discovered SEO. And so I tell that to you just to say that, like, I got lucky in that my idea of writing whatever it is that I wanted to write about sort of just worked for me. Um, if you want to make money, I do not advocate you do that. I truly advocate you find something that people are interested in and that there's a demand for. And there's a gazillion of industries and topics. Like, sometimes people feel overwhelmed because they look online and they think the only thing that they can write about is like entrepreneurship and, like social media, right? Like, no, the more boring, the better. Find the most boring, like, useful, practical thing you can do and write about it. Write about HVACs, write about like air conditioning units and new air conditioning tech and the salaries of HVAC vendors or workers these days. Write a blog about nothing about HVAC and you will make so much freaking money you won't even know what to do with yourself. So so I'm not really giving you an answer because they're both valuable. My personal brand, if that's what you want to call it, that I've started really taking seriously over the last 2.5 years, has like netted me more opportunity than like anything I've ever done. And it's always really shocking to me because when people would say like personal brand, I'd kind of throw up in my mouth a little bit. I was like, that's so fucking stupid. Now that like I see it and can recognize it, I'm like, wow, this thing is super powerful. However, it's not it's very difficult to make like a direct sale from you, right? Like, people buy a thing that they need. No one's gonna just like buy me or whatever. And if you want to create courses, or I don't actually like selling courses that much. I think there's better ways to make money. Let's use the HVAC guy again, right? You can sell HVAC leads. I mean, the demand for home construction over the next 10 to 20 years is just going to completely skyrocket off the roof. So there's way better ways to make, what should I say? There's a more linear path to make money from your writing than to pick a niche, especially like a boring, super pragmatic, profitable industry to do that. However, over the long term, like the really long term, if you can just consistently invest in yourself and like your brand and your name, the best definition I ever heard of a brand is when people know you. That's all you're really doing. You're getting people to know who you are. Like, it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. I heard that and it just totally clicked for me. I was like, oh, that's what a personal brand is. It's got nothing to do with followers or anything. It's just how many people know who you are. When you can build that, I mean, damn, it's generated a ton of opportunity in my life. And there's a pull because it's hard to stay disciplined. You know, you want to start an HVAC blog. Okay, great. Write about HVAC once a week for the next 3 years and see how much you love writing about HVAC 3 years from now, right? Like that's definitely going to happen. And so there's a pull to be like, well, I want to write about Muay Thai or like I want to write about my hike that I took. And so, man, I'm like really going off the rails here. For me personally, like I keep them separate. My timstodds.com newsletter, it's like pretty business oriented, but I write about whatever. Like I take pictures of my family when I go on hikes and there's no rules, and that's cool. I like that. But if I'm going to start a business, the business is about a specific thing, and that's how they monetize.
The things that I've learned in the last few years, and especially in the last few months since taking this show much more seriously, have just been incredible. And you just touched on a couple of them because for me, I did not come from an entrepreneurial background at all, especially in terms of my family. Or I should say, it skipped a generation. Like my grandfather was a real badass business person in downtown Detroit, heart of the Motor City, as a steel welder, and he built exhaust systems, for example, for Mario Andretti. Like he paid for 40 of us to go to Disney World for a week. Nobody had to do anything, just to show up at the airport from all around the world because he wanted to spend time with his family, quality time. And I asked him some questions, but I really, really regret not following in his footsteps in terms of the entrepreneurial piece. But that's because I just didn't understand anything. I hadn't listened to Naval's thread on wealth yet. I came from a very government oriented background, secure your paycheck, get your pension, that kind of stuff, benefits. And I've had my eyes opened so much by interviewing entrepreneurs and learning and collaborating with different people that it's one of those things that I'm just really trying to pay forward. I almost wanted to interrupt you and be like, I want to talk about this a bit. I want to learn from you on this topic. But you said it in kind of a vague way. You said, I don't really like um, selling courses that much. I think that's such a huge topic. Speaking of SEO, this one clip might go viral just from this topic alone. But what do you mean by that?
Geez, there's a lot to say here. They are a bit commoditized now, and I think that's just a cyclical thing. Basically, the main reason why I don't advise selling courses is just because there's better ways to make money and there's better ways to make more money. Like online education is a cool business, but it really tips out at a scale because it's hard to do $10 million a year in online education because there's no once you sell the course, no one's ever going to buy the course again because they've learned what it is that you had to sell them. Whereas, let's talk about that HVAC guy again. If you do a really, really good job on somebody's HVAC, every time they have a problem, which they're going to have, they're going to call you. So from like a just a simple economic standpoint, I think courses are alluring because the margins on them are so high and like anybody can think like, "Oh, I know how to, I don't know, garden. Let me make a course about gardening. Somebody wants to know how to do this." And that's great. And by the way, quick side note, if you want to make a business about selling courses, definitely do it. Like I don't have anything against courses. I just think that there's better ways to build a business. And this is from a guy that I mean, Copyblogger, we don't necessarily sell courses, but we have a membership site which is all like online education. So I'm talking about a book here at the same time, but I can tell you from both sides of it, the margins on like digital products are very, very high. And in my case with Copyblogger, like I hardly have to do anything because I have a partner who basically was given equity and he does all of it. Like my only job is to generate the traffic and I'm just really good at that. So I love it. Like it makes me a ton of money. It's an awesome thing. But the fear that I have is that every Gen Zer in the world looks at, you know, online influencers, thinks if they get 100,000 Instagram followers, then they can create a course about makeup or something. and they're going to get rich. And that's just not how it works at all. Like hardly anybody makes money selling courses. Hardly anybody. And I really mean that. If you look at it, like nobody does. I'd say it's less than 1% of people make a living selling courses, and like 0.001% of people make a decent amount of money. And if you take that and you compare it against a boring service business, well, it's just it's just an easy decision in my part because I own an SEO agency, right? As soon as I got my first client for SEO, I was profitable. There was no upstart costs. I didn't need an email list. I didn't need a website. I didn't need Stripe. I didn't need a funnel. I just walked into somebody's office and I had a conversation with them. And then all of a sudden I was making 2,500 bucks a month. And this is at a point in my life where I was like super broke and like 30 pounds underweight. You know, I mean, like that 2,500 bucks a month meant everything to me. And then I did a good job. And all of a sudden I got another one. And then all of a sudden I'm at 10 grand a month. And I'm like, damn, you know what? I could probably hire an employee. And so now my margins are down to 6 grand a month, but I'm scaling, right? So, excuse me. So there's pros and cons to both, you know, because the margins for digital products are so much higher, but the likelihood of it working is so small. Whereas if you just have like a little bit of grit, a little bit of hustle, and like you're honest with people and just have people, people just don't appreciate how useful it is to have actual conversations with people anymore. You know, we all want to have this crazy online following and be like, yeah, I'm going to make $10 million by doing a tweet, and it's just stupid. You can make so there was this guy that used to sell pierogies in Nashville, and he would show up every Sunday at this farmer's market in Nashville and would completely sell out on pierogies. And I look at that guy and I'm like, this dude isn't taking selfies. He's not, you know, making a vlog about his pierogi business. He's just showing up, smiling at people, shaking their hands. He was so warm. We called him Pierogi Man. Like I would go there every Sunday just because I loved seeing this guy and we loved his pierogies. That guy absolutely made geez, I don't know. He had so many pierogies. Let me just say 300 grand a year, right? Like that's money. That's like a good life in my view. Whereas clutching and clawing for attention and it's like, please buy my course. That it feels too alluring and not smart in my estimation.
Yeah, I appreciate how you kind of use the balance, the scale of like, not really criticizing people for the way that they're making money, but also give, some real insight and education around it. Um, Someone that we've been playing with schedules to come on the show is I believe his name's Mike. When it his handle's a entrepreneur, I believe, and he's pretty big into
Oh, cool. I love that.
yeah, I think it's pretty good. He does like fake Ty Lopez videos and stuff like that. And he's like, but again, he's pretty far on the side of like, I'm going to go extreme. I think what happened with him actually was something along the lines of having a falling out with Gary Vee, speaking of which, because he was supposed to go meet with him. And then he realized he wasn't all he was cracked up to be or something in terms of how that meeting went. And he shared about what led him into looking into like the sort of like I said right at the top, the snake oil piece that exists online. But I also have taken courses from people who have really helped me a lot. Now, I think there's this massive debate. We could probably do this a different time because it might take us hours to go back and forth. But this idea that if you pay for something, you pay attention. And this is really interesting because at the very top, we talked about mixed martial arts and we talked about boxing. And that's always my counter argument to that philosophy that if you pay attention, because you see a lot of people in other areas, and I think fitness and sports is one big one, where it's like they take someone under their wing. You think of that Rocky sort of thing, and they teach them because they want to teach them, and that person shows up at the gym every day at 6 a.m. That's how I learned to start bench pressing and deadlifting and stuff like that. It wasn't because I was paying, it was because I had a really damn good mentor. And so I think kind of both can exist. It's just this what I feel like is that I'm in sort of a hurricane because, and I'm trying to declutter and figure this out because my goal ultimately is to scale the ability to help youth learn entrepreneurship, to learn the skills that they need to own something. could be 1% and they have 99% of a day job. And most of them, because I've met them, do have big dreams to own what they're doing. Like, I think that's be hard to argue that that trend's not still going up. So if it's going up, they need good education. I have a pretty deep belief that education, like Sal Khan, who created Khan Academy, I kind of think it should be free. But then other people say, well, if you're going to be a successful creator in the creator economy, you have to also invest in it. So I kind of feel a little bit like Robin Hood. I'm not straight up stealing people's courses and posting them or anything. But what I've felt like I have to do, because I didn't really know how, but I had all these kids coming to me asking questions, was I had to be like, okay, well, I can pay for David Siteman Garland's Create Awesome Online Courses. I'm going to do that. I'm going to see what he's teaching. And then I have that knowledge at least to be able to pass on. I say all of this to say that I still feel like the hurricane part is I feel like a bit of a fraud teaching this stuff when I haven't yet done it myself. And so I'm trying to think of sort of a more niche thing to actually execute on that. And then I think that'll be the final piece of the puzzle where I can then help these kids, you know?
I do know exactly what you mean, and I would actually encourage you to look at it differently. I guess there's a couple of things there that I would challenge. Like, education is free, and it's been free since a book was first published. Like, when people buy things, they're not actually buying education. They're buying like status in a way, and they're buying convenience in a way, because you can learn something a lot faster when somebody teaches it to you directly. And just for the record, that's totally worth paying for, right? If you want to learn something, buy a course. I've have I ever bought a course? I don't know if I have, but like oh, I have actually. I bought a negotiate. There's a Chris Voss, his Black Swan course, because I'm doing deals all the time, and so like I just knew negotiating would be something really powerful for me. And yeah, okay, it's like perfect example. I learned so much from that course, like mirroring and labeling and empathy and listening, and like how to use those skills intentionally. Um, you should absolutely do that. But the mistake people make, I shouldn't say the mistake, the misconception people have is that when they take a course, they will all of a sudden know how to do it. And that's not true at all. You need to fail. Like, success is so much more failure than it is success. I fail so many times every day. Basically, all day I'm failing. That's all I'm doing. It's just like fucking up all the time and then trying to figure out how to fuck up a little less tomorrow. And I would really encourage people, especially if you're listening to this, to think like, okay, great, buy a course, learn a skill, get somebody to teach you how an ad network works, or how to, I don't know, frame a house. You need to learn how to do that. But I would actually argue that what you're doing is a lot less fraudy than somebody that buys education, especially in college, because you're really just buying a certification. Like, I think MIT hosts all of their courses online for free. You know, that's insane to me. You can take any MIT course right now. Just go do it. And they're all online for free. Most of them are on YouTube, the lectures. There's nothing stopping you from getting free education. What you're paying for at MIT is certification and is status. And so I would actually argue that what you're doing is like more of the direct path, because you're failing in public. You're allowing yourself to figure out these lessons in the real world, because when the day comes that you actually need to put this stuff into action, you're going to be in a way more advantageous position than somebody that took 10 different courses on, you know, helping the youth learn entrepreneurship. That's my view. I know I have, maybe I'm just jaded because I have a chip on my shoulder, but it just doesn't make sense to me. It seems like so obvious in my viewpoint.
Yeah. And I think for me, just to clarify, the fraud piece is like, there are when you think of the idea of, it'd be hilarious. You ask someone like yourself or like Daniel Priestley or something like, uh, "Hey, what do you do to start a business?" God, it's almost like a laughable question of how massive that is. Like, how do you define business? There are so many different types of, right? And so part of it is, for example, I had youth asking me because this was all at the same time. One wanted to start a YouTube channel as a teen mom. One wanted to start a photography business, like freelance, taking photography of weddings, etc. And one wanted to become an author and be able to be a public speaker. And I can go on because these were all kids that I had in one class a few years ago. It was like, okay, well, those are going to take a whole bunch of different types of advice. Like I can't scale the ability to learn that firsthand and then help you learn from it. So that's why I wanted to be, I guess, a bit of a generalist in terms of understanding it all. But to help any one person, I feel like you kind of have to have actually done it yourself, right? And so that was the fraudy part that I was talking about was I haven't actually built like a niche business yet. And kind of similar to what you said earlier about how your personal brand has become like where you can be a little more general, it's somewhat businessy, but that you have other pillars that are a little more specific. And I love the example of you said, well, like, are you going to talk about HVAC for, uh, 3 years straight and not get bored of it? Well, you want to talk about Muay Thai, maybe you want to talk about wakeboarding or how to cook. Um, that was the biggest challenge for me was being able to say, okay, well, what is personal brand, general entrepreneurship things I'm learning? And then do I have enough bandwidth to go make something specific now too,
I would say you have a business when you make a sale. That's the part that nobody wants to do because asking people for money is everybody wants to have attention, but when it comes down to it, for some reason everyone's scared to ask for sales. And that really is the definition of it. And so I guess that's almost a good way to wrap that whole construct up is to say that it's all for nothing unless you make a sale. And maybe that's something that I just got lucky in is that I was always willing to I didn't like it. I still don't like it. It's what I do every day. But I was always willing to be uncomfortable enough to be told no. And most people aren't. And so they'll do all of the things that make them feel like I'm doing something. I'm doing something. And you want to have a business, you want to have the HVAC blog. Okay, great. Cold call 40 HVAC contractors in your city. See how many of them give you any time at all because they're busy. And then when they all hang up on you, call 40 more. And then all of a sudden, let's say I live in Denver, right? You got Denver HVAC.com. You've been working on this thing. You've been working so hard. Like, yeah, I'm really doing it. I'm working. I'm building a business. Well, you're not until all of a sudden you get that one guy that says like, yeah, okay, I'll advertise on your website for $500 a month. Then you did it. And I just think that this whole ecosystem of the attention economy, it's all totally missing the point. Attention is not worth anything. It's worth $0. So like what am I going to do with that? It doesn't happen until you make a sale.
Yeah, that might be one of the most valuable points from this episode is that a lot of people really get that wrong. You mentioned personal branding and how it used to make you want to throw up in your mouth, and maybe it still does a little bit. And now we're talking about sales.
Yeah.
Both of those topics were something that I had to grow into appreciating, and I find them a little bit similar in that I really like the book to Sell is Human, and I also feel like when people say, "Oh, I don't sell anything, or I'm not a salesperson," I'm like, well, let's talk about that a little bit because if you're a teacher or if you have kids or insert situation here, it's like you actually probably are pretty good at sales. You're just not thinking of like the sort of like traditional, what people would say, sleazy car salesman type, like stereotype or whatever. And I feel like personal branding is very similar because it's hard to create much at all without developing some type of personal brand, positive, negative, or neutral, I guess. And so when people start to appreciate that both those things are things we do, so you might as well be aware of them and be building them in a way that you want to. I think that that's really valuable. When it comes to sales, speaking of that, if you were to create a blog post type bullet point, because again, that's a massive topic like storytelling, what are some things that you've learned that help you be a good salesperson?
You just gotta let people tell you what their problem is. I mean, it's sales is one of those things where it's simple, not easy. Um, it's really hard to train yourself not to talk. And this is something that I still catch myself doing every day. I'm not perfect at it at all. I'm way better at it. And I would say I'm like way better than most. But everybody has a problem. And most people are willing to exchange money for solutions to their problem. And so people want to talk about themselves because they want to say like I can do this, I can do this, I did this, I have this certification. And one of the hard things for me to learn is that like nobody actually cares about you at all. And it's not that they're mean, they just have their own lives going on. Like they're only talking to you because they're solving their problem. And it's not rude. Like most of the people you talk to, you're only talking to them to solve your problem. It's just people have needs. And if you can really, really go into every sale, I'll even like do a quick little meditation sometimes before I jump onto a Zoom meeting because so much of sales is like phone calls and Zoom calls these days. And I'll just remind myself like, it's not about me. It's not about me. What's their problem? And then there's a good book called Gap Selling I would recommend. I've read a ton of sales books, and so like I know all the different strategies. I think this one is the most easily digestible because it's such a simple concept, right? Your prospect is at a place and they want to be in a different place. And your job is to tell them how you can close that gap, right? That's all it is. And so, like, you need them to tell you what the gap is. You need them to tell you, this is where I am. You need them to tell you, this is where I need to be. You just listen. And then sometimes, I mean, I just had a deal yesterday, a contract I closed. This guy had an amazing story. His wife was a doctor and she started a clinic and she died. And even just like seeing the look on this guy's face when he was talking about his wife and talking about how the clinic really fell off for a while because of like how he was grieving and he's getting it back a little bit and he just knows that he needs to build this clinic back up in like memory of his wife, you know? And then eventually he said like this is what we're doing. When the clinic was like really operational, this is what we were doing. And then as soon as that happened, I knew I had it because I knew that like I have what it takes to close that gap. And like I said, sales is simple, not easy. Gap selling is a really good like 101 type thing for anybody that's interested in it. But but man, I would like if you can't sell, then you really can't do anything. It doesn't matter what your skills are. If nobody's going to pay you to do them, then it's 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 not worthless because obviously you have value in the world, but it's worthless in the marketplace. And so learn those skills because they'll be super helpful to you. But ultimately, the art of sales is the art of listening. And then like once you find the thing, it's the art of like opportunism to say like, okay, there it is. I got it. And that's how you close because everyone's scared to close.
Well, speaking of skills, you mentioned writing, which I'm sure is at least in part the answer to this effective writing, but you also shared that you're just really good at generating leads when you're referencing Copyblogger as a membership and how your only job is to drive traffic and that you're just really friggin' good at it. I'd be stupid to not ask you about that on an episode like this because obviously that is part of your own personal brand, your reputation, your ability to do that. But again, a lot of people wouldn't even know what that means. So, how are you good at it? What do you do to uh, use that skill in the marketplace?
Well, I show up, I'm annoyingly persistent. It's like one of my best qualities and it's sometimes one of my worst qualities, you know, if you ask like some of my partners. Um And for Copyblogger, like it's all SEO. I mean, for Stodzy, it's all SEO too. But for Stodzy, the industry is so specific that I can just really, really target hyper specialized keywords. And so, Stodzy only gets like 50 to 100 hits to the website a day, but does millions of dollars. Like I guess that's why I like SEO so much because it allows me to be like laser focused. I don't need a lot of traffic. You just need the right people. Um, so yeah, like this would be a whole another hour and a half long podcast because long form writing for like hyper specific intent is how I've built all of my companies, So if I'm creating let's take the HVAC blog again, I wouldn't write about anything on that site that wouldn't, or I should say that doesn't have the possibility of somehow turning into a sale of some kind. And it doesn't mean they're all going to, but like I just it wouldn't make sense. I would never write an article about like the 10 reasons why you want to get involved in HVAC. It's all hyper transactional because if Google is like a transactional problem solving machine, that's the only reason anybody ever goes to Google is because they have a problem and they like want to solve it. They never go for anything else. Doesn't matter how, like whatever they're searching for, it's a mini problem in their life. And if you can align your business with like the hyper focalized, is that a word? With the hyper focalized, let's use it, right? It works. The hyper focused intent behind that search query, it's just guaranteed that it'll eventually turn into sales because like you are quite literally offering people what it is that they're looking for. And it's something that I just decided to specialize in. And I don't know, I haven't done anything. I pay vendors for all my advertising. I pay my partners to do all the management. I don't do anything else with my life really other than generate traffic and close deals.
Super simple.
It sounds like kind of weird now that I say it out loud.
It's perfect though. I think simplicity and minimalism, mentally decluttering is super underrated. When people hear the term SEO for them, they might be like, "Oh, okay, this is something I should get into." Obviously, it's not new, uh, but what is a bit new is kind of the AI craze. Do you have personal fears, or maybe even a better question is, if somebody wanted to get into SEO today, would you have fears for them going down that route when we're in this sort of chat GPT type world right now?
No, I wouldn't. And this is obviously something that I've thought a lot about. There's two things I want to say here. I just published a newsletter about this. Was it yesterday? It was this morning. Yeah, it was this morning's issue. And Google just issued record profits again for Q2. Their their net profits was up like 13% year over year. It's insane. People are still searching and they're still paying to advertise on Google. I was surprised, like it's totally reasonable to think that people are going to just start searching on ChatGPT as opposed to Google. But I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things that seems obvious in hindsight. One of the analogies that I always use is like voice. Like I remember when Alexa came out, everybody thought nobody's going to search on their phones anymore. They're just going to say, "Hey Alexa, like buy me some shampoo or something," and it just didn't happen. And I don't know why. Maybe it's just something in our brain stems that's just more like tactical. Like we like to touch things and like really see evidence of it. Who knows? It very well may be the case that people like looking at options and they like browsing. I'm sure there's some like loss aversion stuff in there. So who knows? I'm totally speculating here. Another thing that I would say, and this I think is more relevant, is that SEO is a really broad term. It means it means like 10 different things. The term itself just means like optimizing something for the search engine, but search engines is a gazillion things. You can buy products, you can find blog posts, and one of the things that Google again has this like secret monopoly on is local business listings. Is Google My Business. Like sometimes I'll drive down the street to pick up my kids from daycare, um, and every single small business I drive by, I'm like, every one of these needs a Google My Business profile, and every one of these people would pay like 2,500 bucks a month for me to manage their Google My Business profile. There's nothing that can even come close to competing to the monopoly that Google has on addresses and information about every small business basically in the world. And okay, so what does Google My Business mean? You know, if you type like restaurants near me on your phone and you see that little map with like those little red pins, that's not Google in the sense that we think Google is offering us third party websites. Like they're not offering us links. Like they own that freaking thing. That is just their own separate database that they list on their own search engine. And, Yahoo can't do anything about it. Bing can't do anything about. Well, actually, does Bing use no, not Yahoo. Yelp. Yeah. Yelp can't do anything about it. So I still personally believe, and I put my money where my mouth is here. I'm like transitioning a lot of what I do for some of my companies here is that local service businesses aren't like people still go to local coffee shops. They still go to local retailers. Like Amazon didn't kill the world like we thought it would. Granted, Amazon's still a huge company and, people buy toilet paper and that kind of stuff on Amazon, but people like to go shopping, man. We just do. And I think that it is a huge opportunity that is only going to ratchet down more and more onto Google. And, AI can do everything they say, right? But I don't know. I just have a hard time seeing that one not because the infrastructure to build it takes so long. That's like millions and millions and millions of people that actually filled out the app. It's not an application, it's a form that says like, this is the name, this is my address, like these are my pictures, these are the services and the products I provide. And I don't know. I just don't think it'd be worth it for an LLM to try to distill that information.
Hmm. Completely agree. Something that always happens on this show every single time without fail is that there are so many ideas. I mean, I take the Tim Ferriss approach, or at least his modern approach, to not doing too in depth, like planning about what question I'm going to ask or stuff like that. I have themes, uh, and there are so many things that I know we could have talked about. Naturally, we have to drop the mic at some point. But one of the things that I'd love to ask you about right before I ask the theme questions is you're a really multi passionate person. You mentioned at the beginning all the things that you love to do. How do you stay focused on all of these great business pillars? Like you talk about all the things you love to do, but then you also share how simple your business life is. Like, how do you stay focused as such a multi passionate person?
It's not that hard. I I certainly have an active mind, and I mean, I'm honestly going through a thing right now where I'm like removing myself from as many things as possible. I certainly got overloaded in my life, so I'm not like a machine. I still get distracted and I still over commit to things that I probably should have said no of. And, sometimes I chase shiny objects just like anybody else. But um the key is people. You mentioned Naval, and something I think that people don't pay attention to is they all talk about Naval's idea of leverage and how he says that like code and media is the ultimate leverage and that capital basically comes next and that labor is the worst form of leverage. And I think that's like so ass backwards. I think it's like the most completely ass backwards thing that he's ever said. And I don't follow him that well, but I did listen to that podcast and it's just wrong. It's completely wrong. You can't do anything without other people. So you think, oh yeah, but you can build a YouTube channel with like 10 million people and you can do it all by yourself. It's like, no, you can't. At that point, like you need a finance team, you need a marketing team, you definitely need a PR team, you like definitely need lawyers. It's just that's not an actual thing. You can't. Sure, code and media have created like this scalability that we've never seen in society before, and I'm not denying that. But the way to do it is to have great people around you and to like build a team and to build for lack of a better word, like community. Like the people that work for me, we've been working together for, I mean, shit, some of us like 14 years. We started all this together. Like I still talk to them every day. Um, Anybody that works for me, I got, I don't know what, like 25 people on my team now, something like that. That's 25 employees all over the world. Every single person that works for me, I guarantee you they would say like, yeah, he's a good boss. I appreciate him. Like he takes care of me. He listens to me when I got something to say. He pays me well. He expects a lot of me. He makes it very, very clear what he expects of me. If I fuck up, he yells at me, but well, actually, when you say that, like he talks to me in private about it. You know, the key is people and creating an infrastructure of people that makes it so that you can focus on building the business. I mean, the classic E Myth, right? If no one's ever read the E Myth Revisited, that book probably, other than the book that helped me get sober, that book probably had like the biggest impact on my life than any other book I've ever read. And that's how you do it. Like, yeah, Naval's just totally wrong about that. You can't do it alone. You don't. It's impossible to build this like one man empire. You need people, and that's how I do it.
Yeah, success is in the agency of others. It's a great moment to
But
kind of like, wind things down and wrap, at least for this time. But, like I mentioned, the idea of your experience building memberships, talking about your personal holding company. I know that that's a topic that you've brought a lot of value to people on, marketing more in general, like, talking about school and education. And then you just mentioned being sober as well. I know that you have quite the reputation for your insights and stuff on that. Like all of these topics, there's so much more that we could talk about. But naturally, for this episode, it always comes a time to wrap. As I list those things, though, and before we do the rapid fire questions and drop the mics, is there anything that you feel like we'd be leaving out or you would like to mention before we wrap?
oh, you're like a really great podcast host, man. I think you're onto something. I think you should keep doing this. Thanks for having me on your show.
Appreciate that. It means a lot more than I can even put into words, which is hard on a podcast. Maybe I need to write about it. Speaking of writing, cool. Thank you so much for saying that. So, what's one thing that you are learning right now? It could be off topic from this stuff, but something that you're learning in the moment right now.
Um, Medieval Japan, or actually feudal Japan. We like to compare it to medieval Japan because it's like warring, like warlords basically. But I've been fascinated with Japan my whole life. I just went through Dan Carlin's like insane 35-hour hardcore history thing all about the rise of Japan and basically World War II. But the coolest quote he says in that over and over again is that the Japanese are like everybody else except more so. And it's so true. They're just different. I don't even know how to say it. They are just so different and they're so freaking cool. I love Japan.
One piece of advice, if you could just leave one, because I know you got a lot of it, but what's one piece of advice that you would pass on to the next generation? You want to leave one piece of advice for your kids. What would that be?
Read books. Don't be stupid. Read every day.
I actually, super side note, but it's cool to see how much of a comeback, or I guess maybe how much books haven't faded yet. Like my kids love to read, and that's my experience with teens, and that's the book that I'm working on personally right now is a self-help book for teens because I see them reading a lot of like uh, books that are like they don't fully understand, but
Awesome.
it's what they're limited with in the self-help genre, and they actually are entertained by them a little bit. Yeah, that's been something that's been really cool surprise for me in this rise of social media and cell phones that kids still like to read. So let's keep that going for sure.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And if you were to ask me a question, I know you're a great podcaster yourself. You have the interviewer mic, and a question comes to mind on these topics or otherwise. What's something you would ask me?
What's that painting? Those are birch trees in the back.
And what's crazy about that is I have shared on some episodes, and I was thinking about this on a I don't know, I was walking or something and it popped in my head. I was like, probably don't have to share that all the time, but it just comes up naturally, because we're talking about grief. Actually, you mentioned a client of yours whose wife had passed away, and almost immediately I got connected to my painting.
Wow.
I also had a different background for a little while and brought this one back. My brothers passed away at 32 and 34 years old. And as a way of coping with that, my dad got into painting. And so for the audio listeners, there's a painting behind me that my dad made.
Wow.
There's no real, I don't think, unless he's sneaking Easter eggs in there, real symbolism to the trees or the like night scene and whatnot. But um, he spread my brother's ashes in the actual painting.
In the paint?
Yeah, exactly. He mixed them in the paint.
Yeah.
So it's a certainly a painting that I won't be bringing to any secondhand stores or selling or anything like that. It's a big time keepsake, and yeah, in kind of a I was about to say strange, but that's probably not the right word, but like a unique way. Uh, that painting definitely keeps me going when I feel like giving up on stuff.
Amazing. Love to hear it.
Thank you for asking.
It's beautiful.
You get so many different places people could go. And I love asking the question why and hearing people's opinions about their own personal brands or company brands. But why and where could people go if they want to support your work?
Well, you don't have to support my work, but you can go to timstodds.com. It's a free newsletter, and I write in it every day. I do videos with it every day. I used to do it every Tuesday and Friday, but I told you that I've just recently removed a bunch of stuff from my life, and part of the reason why is because it's always just been a dream of mine to have like a daily newsletter. I don't even know why. I just always thought they were so cool, and so I'm doing it. And yeah, I mean, look, I get a lot of positive feedback on my newsletter. So timstodz.com, and it's free. There's some paid stuff on there, but you know, the newsletter's free and it always will be.
Yeah, I'm excited to see you keep going with the dailies and not just learn from it, but like have that sort of edutainment vibe from your newsletter. Yeah,
Totally. Yeah, that's what I'm going for.
yeah.
I'm just trying not to take life too seriously, you know? I mean, you can get hung up like, oh, this isn't perfect. I need this to be perfect. And it's like, you know what? I'm just gonna say this thing and then I'm gonna do the next one tomorrow. That's my goal with it.
Well, it'd maybe be weird if you mentioned Seth Godin 3 or 4 times, so I'll just mention him the third time then and say that that there's no better example than that, right? Like do your best, ship the work, and just keep going.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, you too, Justin. Thanks, man.
Thank you.